Do you remember when Jesus says, how is it that you're able to look at the sky and know what the weather is going to be like tomorrow, yet you are unable to discern the season of harvest? What did Jesus mean when he said that? And again, God talks about in the Old Testament, he says, I give you plenty. Look around. I have given you plenty. I have given you much. Yet, because you mock and complain and incessantly mock all the plenty that I give you, I tell you, your harvests will now come out of season. And again, God says, look, you don't even tell the time properly. You mock the time. Don't you know that that in order for you to gain a harvest, the sun must be in its proper position? For you need certain stars to warm the earth that you would have a good harvest. Consider your children. Aren't they like a field? Isn't there a time and a season for planting? Isn't there a time and a season for harvest when it comes to your children? But because you have no respect for the time, but because you mock and complain incessantly that I give you plenty, you will not have a harvest. Consider one last thing. Don't you know that there are only 7 days in a week? There are only 52 weeks in a year. Do you remember reading in the newspaper just a little while ago that the sun is a full month out of its position? And yet you mock and you complain. You choose ignorance instead of knowledge. Consider these things, I urge you, for they really will have an impact on you. What are the fires of Moloch? The Bible talks about the fires of Moloch. God says, how can you do such a thing to your children? It never even entered my mind when I created you for you to send your children to the fires of Moloch. How can you do such a thing? What are the fires of Moloch? Do you remember the early Christians? You know, they used to use the symbol of the fish when they were talking to each other, you know. It was a way for them to discover each other's presence in their own and each other's allegiances. The early Christians had to hide from the world because the world was bent on killing them, throwing them to the lions, throwing them to the fire, throwing them into boiling pots of oil. There are two choices. In any topic you ever come to, there's always this choice and that choice. You know what they are, right? The world has set its heart against God. The world has its philosophies, its mindsets, its ways of thinking, its ways of acting that are totally the opposite of the ways of God. God has given you His Word, and He's shown you what His ways are like. And so there you are in the middle. You got to choose. Who are you going to follow? Who is going to be your father? Who are you going to obey? Who are you going to follow? What God is sharing, if you have a part of Him, is very, very valuable. And if you want it, you got to live it. But in order to live it, you have to go through the world. You have to go through the world. And the world is bent on killing you. There's a story about this particular disciple. He doesn't have a name or anything in the Bible that I can remember. And he says, he talks to the apostles, I think it was, and he says, hey, when I go to work, my master demands that I call him Lord. But I want you to know that in my heart, Jesus Christ is my Lord. But in public, I have to call him Lord. So I just want you to know, if you see me and I'm calling him Lord, I'm not calling him Lord in my heart, but I have to call him Lord with my lips. Okay, so now, what are the fires of Moloch? The world demands that you deny God. The world demands that you don't believe anything that God has taught. The world demands that you believe lies. And the lies are unnatural for us to believe. It is unnatural for us to believe a lie. It's a joyful, majestic thing to encounter the truth. It's a beautiful thing. Lies are putrid swill. And that's what Satan has. Satan spews out of his mouth water in the attempts to drown Christians or disciples of Christ, followers of the way. This water, it's just a putrid swill. It's lie upon lie upon lie. And that's all that comes out of Satan's mouth. That's all that comes out of the world's mouth. Just lie after lie. He tries to drown you in his lies. So how does he do it? Got to get you to do it. So what he does is he's invented this place called a school. And he tells you that you need to send your children to this school. And he wants you to send your children to this school younger and younger and younger, so that he can burn their minds with all these lies. Send your children to school, he says. Send your children. And then he forces his lies into your children's heads to such a degree that they just hate everything. The world teaches the truth. It does teach the truth. It has to teach the truth. Things like the atomic structure and mathematics and, the growth of trees and the wonders, but he does it at such a young age that your children's minds are not capable of accepting or understanding these things. And so the kid starts to feel inadequate. And that's what Satan wants your child to feel, inadequate. And then your Satan and his minions, make your child, especially your boys, to feel inadequate, silly, even stupid. It's intentionally done. It gives you really good information, but your kids are too young to understand it. And so they end up hating things that are beautiful. They don't even want to talk about mathematics. They don't want to talk about the structure of the atom. They don't want to talk about the distance between the sun and the earth. They don't want to talk about these fantastic things. The Pyramid of Egypt, all of these things, the fires of Moloch, are there to burn your children's minds. Overwhelm them with so much homework. Just give them work, so much work that they can't even get it done. They can't even think. And their minds are so burned out, then they only have one other choice, and that's to turn the TV on so they can zone out. So you see your kids zoning out in front of this TV. They just want to rest. Their poor little minds, they just need a rest. But then they're watching TV, and it's more of the fires of Moloch. More of these lies are getting put into these kids. You know, there used to be a time where, you know, there was, you know, John Wayne, you know, like heroic type figures, you know, but those don't even exist anymore. Anywhere, on any TV, any movies, any of that stuff. It's all just putrid swill. And then, you know, it goes on and on. You know, you yourself were a kid, and you know you hated school. You hated it. Especially us as men and boys. We hated school. We didn't like it at all. But then what do? We grow up, we have kids, and then we send our own kids to school. Even though we know how much we hated it, why do you send your children to such a place that hates your children? They hate your children. Especially the boys. Especially the boys. Especially the boys. And then there's these women. They're so angry with boys and men. They're so angry that they cannot be a man. They've rejected their natural functions, these women. That they take a great hand and a great part in burning these boys. They say these boys are not acting like girls, so what do? You go to the sorcerer and you get medications. Get these medications to make these boys be girls. You can't stand the fact that boys might grow up to be men, so you put them on medications. You don't even allow them to be boys. Boys are not girls. Boys are boys. And if you, as a parent, have any love for your child, you'll help your sons grow to be men, and you won't oppress them. You even put your kids on drugs to try to burn the boy out of them. The fires of Moloch. How can you do such a thing to your own children? Especially the boys. Boys want to grow up and be a man. Boys don't want to grow up and be a girl. Only women that have rejected their natural functions want boys to grow up and be a man, and be a woman. Outrageous. The fires of Moloch. Yeah, you want to burn the world's philosophies into your son or daughter? There's a reality about dealing with the world, though.